This is one of the Antarctic's destroyers/capital ships. The large pylons at the side were for visibility and informing the operators of where the larger hull was positioned. This main hull is completely submerged underwater, which significantly improves stability even in the insanely high waters of the Antarctic. Waters which almost constantly crashed over the decks of these vessels. Each of these vessels was powered by twin nuclear reactors, each driving steam turbines, then driving their props. These props, being positioned on outriggers, allowed the Antarctic vessels to steer far more rapidly, though on the whole, maneuverability was the only mobility advantage the Antarctic vessels had, for with their massive quantity of surface area underwater, they were relatively slow by modern standards. They were nevertheless more than capable of keeping up with the destroyers of the rest of the world at that time. The Antarctic ships were extremely standardized, and so stepping onto one would be the same as stepping onto any other of that same classification. Each vessel had been designed approximately 300 years prior, with the expectation that they would remain in service for more than 400 years. Due to this, they were designed to be extremely easy to modernize, and thus easily kept adequately modern to stand up against newer vessels, though recently they have become quite obsolete. They were originally designed in the age of sail and intended to go toe-to-toe with wooden vessels and mere cannonballs. An important feature of every naval vessel is its armor, of which the Antarctic exceeds everyone else. Their battleships had, from innermost to outermost, 1 foot of forged steel, followed by a 3-foot air gap, followed by half a foot of forged steel, followed by something only experimented with by other nations. Within that outer 6 inches of steel was a long series of pipes. These pipes were then filled with refrigerants used to induce the hull to reach a temperature of negative 40 degrees, prompting ice to rapidly begin forming on the hull. In Antarctic waters, this ice would often reach thicknesses exceeding 10 feet. In warm waters, the ice could rarely get beyond 2 feet. The heat from the heat pumps was released through steam vented out of the top of the conning tower of the semi-submersible vessels. This removed the heat from the vessel extremely rapidly, getting it as far away as possible quite quickly. Altogether, this provided the Antarctic battleships with a renewable form of armor, making it extremely easy for them to continually take fire in Antarctic waters and recover from battles in warmer waters, though this recovery did demand a decent period of time and a large quantity of stress upon the electronics and reactors of the vessels during that time. At the bottom of the hull, the Antarctic did not expend any coolant to make a barrier of ice, and instead simply had 1 foot of steel on the inside, an entire 3 feet of solid concrete, followed by another foot of steel on the outside. This was both permanent ballast and also defenses from the aquatic creatures, which would of course make attacks from the bottom of the hull, preferring to attack from positions which would be more challenging for the Antarctic to repel them from. Though of course the Antarctic did eventually develop something they called actively aggressive sonar. This actively aggressive sonar was designed not only to be extremely grating upon the aquatic creature's senses, but to potentially kill them if they got too close as well. The upper decks of these ships were protected by a grand total of 2 feet of steel, evenly divided into 3 individual barriers, all of which were air-gapped from one another by 1 foot. This upper hull could not be covered in an extremely thick layer of ice at the best of times, and so this added armor was needed. Each of the turrets was protected by 6 inches of forged steel, with an air gap of 2 feet, followed by 3 inches of steel, 1 foot of concrete, and another 6 inches of steel. The AA turrets were remotely operated, and yet were still protected by 6 inches of steel. Additionally, the ice was held on more effectively via a framework of piping in patterns very similar to those used to reinforce concrete. One of the many upgrades to the ship was large tanks for holding liquid nitrogen. This liquid nitrogen allows the ship to reduce the emissions of steam when stealth is more advantageous, though of course these vessels aren't necessarily that stealthy, just marginally more stealthy than other naval vessels of their era. All of these factors cumulatively ensured that the Antarctic battleships were practically impervious to all attacks of that era at least. The modern era has a variety of ways to counter them, but these vessels were not designed at the modern times. They were designed far before the ironclad was even developed, so some slack must be given to their design. To the best of my knowledge, battleships are no longer fielded by the Antarctic military, not only because they lost the vast majority of them to the aquatic beings, but also because their obsolescence was just excessive. In spite of the Antarctics being completely surrounded by oceans, they chose to rely solely upon their air force, aircraft carriers, missile boats, and, most importantly, the all-seeing citadel. Don't worry, we'll get into that significantly later, but suffice it to say, if you can see it, the only reason you're alive is because they want you to see it. That weapon is quite simply unbelievably powerful. Even once I explain every detail, I don't think you'll fully realize the import of that weapon. An additional article, which is missing from this model as well as others I will be showing, was torpedo nets, which were present on practically all Antarctic vessels. On the whole, it was more than adequate for its purpose at the time, taking anything another vessel could throw at it without noticing whilst firing back with guns twice their size. In the modern era, though, it would be a sitting duck. The draft of this vessel was a grand total of 75 meters, making it demand excessively deep harbors. Its length was 329 meters, and its width, not including the outriggers for the props, was 70 meters. And remember, thumbs up means to shove it up your ass, so please click the quote-unquote like button whether you like this or not, and subscribe with the bell icon